as living sacrifices, holy, acceptable to God, which is our reasonable service. Our nation has embraced Christian values, and the rule of law has our own to be governed by. May Christian values and the rule of law reign supreme throughout our nation. We thank you, Father, that you are the same God who endued Solomon with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and his nation with wealth. Do the same for Prime Minister and his ministers and backbenchers, the wisdom and knowledge of God to govern our nation with integrity and righteousness. Turn our darkness into light and our poverty into wealth. Bless, I pray thee, the leader of the opposition and his team this morning. Now, Father, continue to lead, guide, direct. Bless, preserve, and keep us and our deliberations today, for we ask it in whose name? Jesus' name. And thy name, thy kingdom come, will be done. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. Honorable members, it is with a measure of regret that I must advise you this morning that I was informed of the passing of Mr. Charles Oden. Mr. Oden was a long-time public officer who worked in the Immigration Department for a number of years. And Mr. Oden was transferred to the House of Assembly in January 1997. And he served as the Human Resources Manager for a number of years. Mr. Oden became editor of the Hansard here at the House of Assembly until his retirement in March 2009. On behalf of the honorable members, I wish to express my condolences to Mr. Oden's family, to the staff of the Department of Immigration, and to the House of Assembly. And we pray God will strengthen his family and sustain his wife in this time of bereavement. When the House suspended its business on Monday, the 12th of June, the honorable member for Yamacraw had taken the floor. Now the chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw.
Mr. Speaker, I am honored to stand present in this honorable House of Assembly as a representative of the great constituency of Yamacraw and as the Minister of State for Legal Affairs in the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs. Indeed, I am humbled by the opportunity before me to elucidate the agenda for this ministry. Mr. Speaker, before I begin, I must take this opportunity to express profound gratitude to the Almighty God for his grace and mercy toward my family and I and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. In the words of William Shakespeare, I say unashamedly, O Lord, who lends me life, lend me a heart replete with thankfulness. Mr. Speaker, I am aware of the fact that I am the sum total of the experiences and people that God has graciously allowed to influence this life that he has lent to me. In that vein, I crave your forbearance to thank my beloved wife, Mistress Cathy Ann Johnson, and my children, namely Christian, Ariana, and Megan. I thank my beloved mother, Mistress Sadie Dossett Scott, for her undying love and support. Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank my grandmother, the late Mistress Drusilla Dossett, the matriarch of the family, and my maternal aunt, Reverend Verna Storr. I had the good fortune to live with them and to be taught important life lessons by them in my beloved community of Dowd's Cat Island. This is also true of my aunts Grace, Jenny, Nika, and my uncle Renty, and Bala, who I know are watching by way of television from Cat Island. Mr. Speaker, while I am standing, I would like to take this opportunity to express or extend Father's Day greetings to all of the fathers in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and to all of those who are not biological fathers, but who have taken up the God-given privilege. That said, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank Mr. Arthur D. Onhana, Jr., my legal father in the law. And I quite recall when I exited the Royal Bahamas Police Force, because it was said that I was a little unruly and uncontrollable. Mr. Hanna took me under his wings, and along with Mr. Hanna and his family, they nurtured me, taught me, and gave me important directions, life directions, and so I'm grateful to him. I know that he's in the UK now, retired, and he watches by way of the internet. Mr. Speaker, I thank my beloved father, the late Mr. Oscar Johnson, for his invaluable contributions to my life. I thank him for believing in me and for teaching me the importance of love of God, education, love and respect for my history, identity, and my fellow men. And Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me if I did not say more about my father. I quite recall when I left Cat Island, I came where I lived with my grandmother, and I came to Nassau. I went to A.F. Adley High School, and my father was a printer. And it was his desire that I become a printer. But I was in the 10th grade when my father learned that I was unable to read. And he introduced me to Eris Monka and Mistress Gail Wisdom. And I quite recall when he told me, he says, you're a man, you still have to work. And so I worked as a stevedore. And I recall the days when he came and he would bring me lunch. And then I got a trade, and he came then. And he taught me about my history, and that I am and we are the dreams and aspirations, as Maya Angelou says, of our forefathers who were slaves. He identified that there was a time when there were certain social privileges that were not ours. But he expected me, that a baton was being passed, and he expected me to live up to that. And I'm so grateful that he believed in me. He told me what I can be, and he always looked at me and he said, son, you have that it factor. And I used to say all the time, I say, what is Daddy talking about? But now that he's gone, I wish that he was here to see his boy. And I quite recall when he was in his 70s and he was on his bed, and he says, "Els, I'm on my last leg." He says, "I'm shining, and I want you to promise me this one thing. I want you to shine." And so I want to say to Daddy that love it or hate it, whoever. Love it or hate it, your boy, made in the image and likeness of the Almighty God, is on top, and I'm going to shine until my heart's. Shine on. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I must confess that there is a group of patriotic Bahamians who I have the privilege of representing in this honorable house. I cannot stand without thanking the good people of Yamacraw, and standing here, for sending me here to represent them in this honorable place. And that is in the highest form of public commitment, and that is public service. By extension, I thank my campaign team and the many persons who gave me support. Mr. Speaker, I am proud to stand before the Bahamian people, a servant who is both willing and able to lead in the development of our great country, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, our government understands that the protection of the rule of law and the strengthening of our judicial system is necessary for maintaining the trust of the Bahamian people. That trust has been eroded over the last 5 years, and to rebuild this trust, this government must present its agenda for the Bahamian transparently and implement it in ways that keeps us accountable to them. Our Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Dr. Hubert A. Minnis, has laid the agenda out across a number of communications, including our manifesto, the speech from the throne, and most recently, the 2017-2018 budget communications, delivered by the member for East Grand Bahama, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. I join colleagues who have commended the member for East Grand Bahama, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, for presenting an excellent budget, setting the direction for the management of public finance and our economy during the 2017-2018 fiscal year. We want to make it clear, Mr. Speaker, that from day one, we intend to be open and transparent and without hidden agendas. The scope of the Attorney General and the government's agenda. Mr. Speaker, as Minister of State for Legal Affairs, it is important to note that the Office of Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs will play an integral role in the execution of this administration's agenda. The Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs is expansive with a broad portfolio that touches every ministry, department, statutory body, and government corporation. As the people's law firm, we are responsible for advising the entirety of government. We are the prosecutors of wrongdoers, guardians of the public interest, and the authors of legislation. Mr. Speaker, 4 primary divisions in the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs work in tandem to drive the agenda of government. The Department of Public Prosecutions, responsible for instituting, prosecuting, and ceasing criminal proceedings against those alleged to have committed a crime, is an essential actor in the safety and security of our communities throughout our nation. The Department of Legal Affairs, which is divided into 4 sections, civil chambers, civil litigation, international legal cooperation, and legislative drafting, is responsible for advising the government as it navigates its agenda, ensuring that we vigorously defend the interests of the Bahamian people in civil proceedings, maintain our legal obligations with regard to both criminal and civil matters. It is also responsible for drafting principal legislation for Parliament and any subsidiary legislation for ministries, departments, and corporations of government. Mr. Speaker, our government came to power with a mandate of reform. It has proposed through the speech from the throne a robust legislative agenda. I have personally counted 19 instances where this government's priority explicitly require either new or reformed legislation, from improving tax laws to reforming education legislation and introducing new law like the Court Services Act. Specifically, it is the legislative drafting department's imperative to draft new legislation that responds to this government's agenda and reflects the spirit of its intent, all for the benefit of the Bahamian people. The Law Reform Commission, the 3rd division of the Ministry of Legal Affairs, also plays a significant role with the unique responsibility of drafting modernizing, and reforming existing legislation. Mr. Speaker, beyond the legal work of the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, this portfolio also includes the Registrar General's Department. The Registrar General is responsible for recording of the vital records of the state and citizens, including births and deaths, marriages, deeds, and documents. Departments like the Companies Office and Intellectual Property Office not only record data, but their processes affect the ease of doing business in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, as you can see, given the full scope of the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, the execution of the government's agenda will rely heavily on the efficient and effective management of this ministry. The Bahamian people can rest assured that once again, our commitment to transparency and accountability will ensure this. An agenda specific to the Office of the Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, while the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs will have a part to play across the whole of the government's agenda, there are agenda items specific to this ministry. I would like to turn to these now. The member for East Grand Bahama reminds us in his contribution that there are things that the Bahamian people expect from the government. Among the expectations, the member listed safe and secure communities, a business and regulatory environment that supports entrepreneurship and transparency and accountability, falls squarely at the door of the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs. Mr. Speaker, in order to meet these expectations, in the speech from the throne, our government outlined some of the key goals and deliverables over the next 5 years for the Office of Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs. Enacting legislation, and I will go through the deliverables, Mr. Speaker. Enacting legislation to establish the Office of an Independent Director of Public Prosecutions. Now, Mr. Speaker, this issue is not new. About a year or two ago, the bar had the opportunity to do a training seminar, and this was a hot topic. As a matter of fact, former attorney generals in the persons of Mr. Alfred Sears, QC, a sitting jurist, all spoke to the need for the director of public prosecutions to be independent. And I quite recall Mr. Sears referring to his experience with one Mr. Bradley Roberts and the feeling he got in doing that. Recently, we had the incident in, I think it was May Guana with Mr. Gray and the administrator. We all sit in cabinet, and this office is so important to the stability of a constitutional democracy. I want to congratulate the government of the Bahamas for finally coming to the conclusion and doing something that is wise, that is honest, and that is transparent. And that is bringing legislation to make the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions independent. And so I will read again. Enacting legislation to establish the Office of an Independent Director of Public Prosecutions. In support of this endeavor, certain functions now performed by the Attorney General, such as the issue and authorizing the commencement of legal actions in sensitive matters or nulli prosequis, will be transferred to the Director of Public Prosecutions. Now, Mr. Speaker, my Prime Minister and my government has indicated that we came to office, and we did come to office on a policy of transparency and accountability. And this government, and you will see further on in my speech, is going to undergo a public education process. And I saw Mr. Renard Henfield here earlier. And a part of that public education process is to engage civil society. So you saw before we won the elections, you had the leader of the party marching with We March and encouraging people to be involved. Even now, he said to all of the members of Parliament that we must engage in public forums so that we can discuss certain issues, so that issues such as nolle prosequi, will not be something that is elusive, that you don't know the definition of. The people just need to know. It's when you start a case or you decide to stop a case. And sometimes you may decide to stop or start a case because there may not be sufficient evidence. The parties involved may no longer want to carry on with the case anymore. The length of time that it was taken to bring the case might have been too long, so you may not have justice. And sometimes you want to always avoid the very appearance of conflict. And so what you will see our government do over the next 5 years is that accept the issues go to national security and really go to national security, because I'll deal with certain other issues that happen in this very same house that didn't really go to national security. The Bahamian people have a right to know, and they have a right to be educated. One of the other deliverables is creating a Bureau of Investigation to investigate matters referred by the Auditor General. Amending the Public Disclosure Act to broaden the scope of applications to include campaign reform and to make provisions for direct referral to the independent prosecutions. And I want to commend the Prime Minister for saying that, listen, you have to give your disclosures. That's a part of accountability.
The law.
You're serving the Bahamian people. Yeah. This issue is not germane just to the Bahamas. Mr. Trump won the elections, and they wanted to know what his ties. In Europe now, they're flying drones over a public servant's house to find out where did they get the assets. In the past administration, there was this whole accusation that some person saw service in government as an opportunity to benefit. And we must be accountable to the Bahamian people by speaking to issues such as campaign finance reform. I quite recall when I was campaigning, there were persons who offered me funds. I said, I can't accept it. I have an obligation to the Bahamian people. And it keeps us accountable. And it's not nothing strange. And I want to commend the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas that in 2017, we're going to bring legislation to the Bahamas. Another deliverable is modernizing and increasing the efficiency of the judicial system to give wider access to justice. We will improve the efficiency of the judiciary by acting a Court Services Act to remove the office of the judiciary from public service, and we will require all new magistrates and judges to attend the newly created Justice Training Institute. And I know members of the judiciary might be watching. And I quite recall, and you were there, Mr. Speaker, in the 2016 presentation given by the sitting Chief Justice, where he looked at the plant and facility of the judiciary. And if you don't believe me, you can walk out of this house and go and see the Supreme Court right now. The windows are dropping off. The air conditions don't work. Sometimes the sewage in Nassau Street goes bad. And guess what? Especially in the magistrate's court, that is where about 80% of the cases go. And guess who represent that population? The poor and the indigent and the destitute, who we claim that we love. And so what the Chief Justice was saying in his 2016 address is, listen, give me $2 million so that I can avoid what Justice Hall described as bureaucratic impertinence, where I don't have to go cap in hand, as Mr. Justice John Isaac says. And he quoted from Oliver Twist, where the young boys go to the old man and say, please, sir, give me some more porridge. And all he asks for is $2 million. And as the member for East Yamacraw said, we gave, or the government, East Grand Bahama, East Grand Bahama, $25 million was given to Carnival. When you had the leader of the judiciary saying he needed $2 million, and in describing how he laid out how the monies would be used, he laid out how he will account to the money to the government, but he said this situation where the judiciary has to always go begging should never happen. How could we find $25 million when our schools are dilapidated? When we have drunkenness, one of our richest cultural experiences, we don't invest. I don't think we've ever invested $10 million at one time in drunkenness. And I must strike a blow for Cat Island. I like rake and scrape. There's nothing that gets me moving like rake and scrape. And we have a whole festival. Have we ever given $5 million to rake and scrape? 5,000. So I want to say it's ludicrous to have expended the funds of the Bahamian people in that way. You took it to Washington? Another of the deliverables, Mr. Speaker, is improving the efficiency of the magistrates' court by seeking to introduce audio-visual digital recording system to reduce the need for manual recording of evidence by magistrates. This will ensure that the transcripts of trials and preliminary inquiries are prepared and certified in a timely manner to reduce delays in cases. Enhancing efficiency, this government will amend the 82-year-old magistrate rules of court 1934, which governs proceedings so that magistrates' court summons will no longer have to be served by police officers only. This will release our police officers to actively fight crime. Another of the deliverables, Mr. Speaker, is implementing a gender-based violence national strategic plan. Now, for some years, Mr. Speaker, I must confess, and I'm still a human rights activist at heart, but I've listened to the lamentations of Dr. Sandra Dane Patterson. I've heard the crime reports and heard how our women and our girls are denigrated and disrespected. And I've listened to, I know that the Minister of National Security is going to be doing certain things to protect our visitors as they come to our shores. But Mr. Speaker, after signing on to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the CEDAW, the Prevention of All Violence Against Women and Discrimination Against Women, UN Declaration on the Rights of the Child, it is time through civil society to recognize the needs of our women and our children. And Mr. Speaker, if we take care of our women and our children, we won't have much problems, you know, because we will rear young men who understand their obligation to our community and to our country. And I crave your forbearance to read something that was handed to me by my father, and it's by Latimer. It says, "He is no true man who ever treats woman with anything but the profound respect. She is no true woman who cannot inspire and does not take care to enforce this. Any real rivalry of the sexes is the sheerest of folly, most unnatural nonsense. God," and listen to this, "God has placed the genius of woman in her heart because the work of this genius are always works of love." We must do more in this country, Mr. Speaker, to protect that genius, the mothers of civilization. And it would be remiss of me, while we do that, Mr. Speaker, if we do not recognize those who are among us, who the Master describes as himself. When you see Jesus Christ, he says it's the poor. They say, "When did not serve you?" And he describes certain persons in our midst. There are certain, pardon me, there are certain persons in our communities, Mr. Speaker, that we can no longer, as we clean up the city of Nassau, as we look to protect the human dignity of the woman and the child, we can no longer, Mr. Speaker, pretend as if we don't have immigrant communities. We cannot walk around them. I live on Cowpen Road. And let me give you a scenario. We have lights, we have police officers, we have everything that goes around. Can you imagine in a community where the houses are built onto each other? There's no light, there's no social services, there's no police officers, and you got a young girl at age 16, fully developed, transient community, in the night, and that does not speak to our dignity or our sense of urgency. We have laws in terms of how we should build and construct homes. We have to enforce them. When we speak of, absolutely, and when we speak about latrines and outside toilets, if it's not good for the Bahamians, it must not be good anywhere. Yes. And the other thing, we must do it in a humane and respectful way. But it can't be, Mr. Speaker, when we're looking to find ways to house, to give housing to police officers, to give housing to teachers, garbage men, that we can have persons who just come to the country and decide that they're going to build anywhere. We have to address this problem. It's the elephant in the room, and everybody knows about it. And some of them in that community votes for us. Another of the deliverables is bringing the Child Protection Act into full force by establishing regulations to govern the Children's Registry and for the creation of the Office of a Minor's Advocate. Introducing legislation to strengthen financial regulations in the Bahamas. Introducing legislation to all the government to meet its international obligations with respect to financial regulations and supervision. Mr. Speaker, I believe that we can categorize various agenda items as three primary strategic priorities for the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, namely, systematic reform of the justice system. Secondly, enhancing financial services and the business regulatory environment. Thirdly, supporting the transparency and accountability in governance. Mr. Speaker, these three strategic priorities encapsulate the government's agenda as it relates to the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs, and will act as a roadmap and focal point for our work over the next 5 years, realizing our mandate in the current fiscal environment. Mr. Speaker, as you can see, this is an ambitious agenda for the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs. Ordinarily, realizing these priorities would require the injection of new resources, that is, money, equipment, and materials and human resources, to ensure they are not only achieved, but achieved in a way that is both sustainable and impactful. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, as the member for East Grand Bahama has detailed, our current fiscal environment does not allow for this. Without a full rehearsing of the members for East Grand Bahama's contribution, this Honorable House and the Bahamian people have been made aware of the fiscal predicament in which we find ourselves. Zero or no economic growth over 4 straight years, and an economy that will likely still be smaller in 2017 than it was in 2012. Despite 5 years of population and labor force growth, are indicators of our precarious position. Mr. Speaker, a lack of fiscal discipline leading to excess government spending resulted in misplaced fiscal targets, exponential increases in the level of public debt, and the embarrassing credit rating downgrades reinforce this point. It is important to remember, Mr. Speaker, that this is all despite $1.1 billion in increased revenue receipts from the implementation of value-added tax. Mr. Speaker, because of the fiscal mismanagement, our government finds itself holding the line on expenditure. In the face of the agenda before us, the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs is unable to receive any increase in our opening budget. In fact, the only increases in expenditure have gone to a significantly higher level of debt redemption and accommodating only the highest priority obligations of the government. And Mr. Speaker, I must stop here to commend the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. On taking office, it was my delight to accompany the Honorable Attorney General on an inspection of the facilities. And Mr. Speaker, the only thing that was missing in that office, especially on the ground floor where there wasn't any air conditioned for the longest, was a man running around in a loincloth with a whip. That's how bad it was. Almost intolerable to breathe. The Honorable Attorney General gave instructions that persons were to go home at 2:30 in the day. And so I want to commend the Office of the Attorney General and those persons who work at the Attorney General's office for still performing their task despite difficult circumstances. As I see it, Mr. Speaker, while challenging this fiscal environment is not an excuse to delay work on realizing the ministry's strategic priorities. Instead, it is an opportunity to show that we can be innovative, that we can be nimble, resourceful, and focused in our work. This will mean, Mr. Speaker, working closely with community stakeholders to implement programs to support the priorities we have laid out. It will also mean a reliance on our international partners like the United States Embassy and the Inter-American Development Bank to provide technical assistance and grants where necessary. Since we are able, we must build upon the previous administration's progress, and where necessary, we must trim the fat. A reliance on reaching clear targets informed by key performance indicators and evidence-based policies measuring twice before to cut once will ensure that we eliminate wastage. Mr. Speaker, I see in the midst of crisis a bright opportunity for the advancement of the interests of the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, despite the difficult times ahead, there will be no languishing for the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs this budget year. I believe that before us there is a clear path to commencing or realizing our government's agenda. In the case of our first priority, systematic reform of the judicial system, we will focus on 3 areas: strengthening the Department of Public Prosecutions, increasing the efficiency of courts, and thirdly, providing greater access to justice. Strengthening the Department of Public Prosecutions. This government has made it clear that it is a vital part of the administration's agenda. A vital part of the administration agenda is to establish an independent department, director, and Department of Public Prosecutions. Before granting this independence, this office must be strengthened. We propose to do the following things. 1, providing new information technology resource to prosecutors. The procurement of this technology was underway prior to this government coming into power, and we intend to manage its execution in a transparent and accountable way. Providing the opportunity for advanced training abroad for the Director of Public Prosecutions. Making available continuous training for prosecutors in the Department of Public Prosecutions. Increasing the efficiency of the courts. The government has proposed enacting a Court Services Act. It is important that this act respond directly to the challenges and opportunities the current arrangements between the judiciary and the public service presents. Prior to drafting the Court Services Act, we will undertake a comprehensive assessment of court operations, from administrative functions to justice system mechanisms, to ensure that the new act is part of an evidence-based policy for the reform of the operations of the court. This year, we will also implement a new digital audio recording system in the Magistrates' Court to reduce the need for manual recording of evidence. Greater access to justice. We must not only ensure that our justice system is efficient, it must also be just. We will begin the assessment of our family court system as it currently exists, with a view to reforming this system so that it works for those who depend on it to provide relief. We will also begin the process of drafting regulations for the Children's Registry. I will commence the strategic planning process for the establishment of the Office of the Minors Advocate. To relieve some pressure on the justice system and provide alternative sentencing opportunities for young offenders with minor offenses, we will work with the community organizations like Project Youth Justice to initiate programs that will rehabilitate our young people. Finally, we must hire a chief public defender to continue to fortify the Office of the Public Defender. Mr. Speaker, many of the justice reform initiatives I have presented for 2017-2018 are already supported by the Citizen Security and Justice Program, funded by the IDB loan. This program has allocated $5.5 million for this work over 5 years. The U.S. Embassy and the U.S. Center for State Courts are also providing resources for the implementation of digital audio recording systems. Mr. Speaker, while some of these initiatives precedes this government's electoral win, it is now our responsibility to manage them to ensure that they fit the people's priority and that their implementation is managed in a focused, transparent, and accountable way. Mr. Speaker, priority 2, enhancing financial services and the business regulatory environment, provides an opportunity for us to direct our efforts specifically on improving the ease of doing business in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, you may recall that in 2015, the Bahamas ease of doing business ranking slid from the 106th spot to the 120th spot. In 2016, we were ranked 121st out of 190 nations. Meanwhile, countries in our region like Jamaica continue to improve their ease of doing business ranking. Certainly, our country, given its resource, can do better, and we aim to do better going forward. Mr. Speaker, once again, we need evidence-based policy to write our trajectory. This is why, during this year, we will assess and identify main bottlenecks affecting the ease of doing business for the purpose of developing policy to unplug these bottlenecks. Develop an action plan for improving the management of civil registries and associated services. Simultaneously, Mr. Speaker, we must complete the updating of the Intellectual Property Office, a project which has been delayed for 3 years. Mr. Speaker, the Intellectual Property Office and intellectual property regulations protects our entrepreneurs, especially in what is now called the orange economy, the creative economy. We must also meet the requirements for World Trade Organization accession and obligations with respect to the Economic Partnership Agreement. Excuse me. The creative economy is at the frontier of the economic development and usually involves those who produce intellectual property products such as music, books, films, games. However, sectors that focus on providing business-to-business creative services, including advertising, public relations, and direct marketing, also rely on intellectual property law and regulations to protect their work. It is our goal this year to complete the drafting of the new intellectual property regulations that will meet our international obligations and protect businesses at home and allow the suite of new IT laws to be brought into force. The enhancement and protection of intellectual property rights will, in turn, set the stage for new industry, economic growth, and expansion of the role of the Bahamas in the global economy. Finally, Mr. Speaker, priority 3 speaks to supporting transparency and accountability in governance. This strategic priority requires the engagement of the length and breadth of the government. It requires all hands on deck. As this administration plots a course for how best to achieve the government's wide transformation, the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs stands as an example for how ministries can and should operate with transparency and accountability. During the last term, the Office of the Attorney General went 3 years before realizing an annual report. Mr. Speaker, this cannot happen again. We have an opportunity to institutionalize regular and standardized reporting across government. And I believe that we can start with the Office of the Attorney General. This year we will, implement a new annual reporting policy in the Office of the Attorney General that explains the objectives, structures, and responsibility of all stakeholders in compiling of the annual report. A timetable for the production of annual report to officially set a timing schedule for its completion will be made public. A distribution plan that clearly lays out how the public can be given the greatest access to annual report will also be produced. The Office of the Attorney General hopes to set a new standard of accountability worthy of emulation. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamian people cannot hear from us only twice a year, at a budget debate and during the opening of legal year. And given the weight of the responsibility that the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs holds, we must be required and willing to communicate with the Bahamian people in a consistent and effective way. This is the people's government, and we are the people's law firm. Therefore, the ministry will implement strategic communications plans that will focus on the following: engaging the Bahamian people regularly, proactively, and transparently using all available outlets, educating Bahamians about the work that we do, highlighting the work to transform the justice system and reform government services, encourage individual and community involvement in the justice system. And as I said earlier, civil society plays a very important role in government. And during the campaign, persons would always speak about the FNM, the PLP, and the DNA, and I stopped them and I said, in America you have the Democrats and the Republicans. But what is fundamental to government is the role of civil society, those groups within the community coming together. And they don't even have to come together, but exercising their right of freedom of expression, association, and movement, and bringing issues and educating themselves on issues so that no politician, no government can get away with what was done in the last 5 years. And I want to publicly thank civil society for their awakening, especially in the last 2 years. And I encourage, and I encourage civil, and I encourage civil society to continue those efforts, to ask about the Freedom of Information Act, to ask about, oh, I see, I can't hear it now, to ask about women's rights, to discuss them, and to demand that we in Parliament be accountable, because this is representative government. And I can't say it over and over again, how I admire and I respect the Prime Minister for saying that each parliamentarian, especially from our side, must go back into our community and hold town meetings, invite the people. He will sometimes attend. The Minister of Health will sometimes attend, and they've already started doing that. So you don't hide behind no closed doors. You don't decide that. You don't get to decide that when you come to this house and you're going to represent the Bahamian people that I'm going to go on the radio, but I'm not going to take any questions. Nonsense. You have an obligation to represent and turn off the phone, and they can't catch you anymore. I mean, they can't be unreasonable. We must say that. But at the same time, we have an obligation to serve people and to give back. Mr. Speaker, I've laid the steps we will take over the next year to make real and lasting progress on accomplishing the strategic priorities of this administration's agenda. We will, no doubt, find ourselves depending on the talent and hard work of the administration, technical team, and staff at the Office of Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs to achieve all that is being set out. And again, Mr. Speaker, it would be remiss of me if I don't thank them again. Because I quite recall when I was bar president, we sent communications to the AG's office, and they expressed concerns, those lawyers. Can you imagine a 25-year-old young lady just coming back from law school, and she's now having to prosecute some of the most heinous crimes in a very small society, where somebody may have bail and then she might be shopping in the same store. Man, you got to listen to our security concerns. They may be real. You can't have them coming down all the way from John F. Kennedy Drive, and there's nowhere for them to sit. I want to thank the vendors around here who allow them to sit in their restaurants. We should create a facility for them to treat them with respect. You can't have them sitting down with no air condition. The process of training and promotions are irregular. You bring in people in and out of the office who are not properly vetted. Officers of the Attorney General's office make serious decisions on a daily basis about matters of state, life and death decisions. And we can never pay them for what they do. They deserve the requisite respect and courtesy by way of proper office facilities, engaging with their superiors, being able to ask reasonable questions about plant and facility. And I know why I say this, because members of the Judiciary commented on some of the things that they had to undergo, officers from the Attorney General's office. So I must commend them for being committed to the Bahamian people and for doing the work that they have done. And I want to commend again, and I want to say publicly, you know, the Attorney General, on going into the office, he says, man, this is a dump. Why is there no air conditioning here for these people? Get it done. Get it done. And like Mr. Campbell said, some of these places aren't fit for your animals. And we wouldn't treat our pets like that, the way that we would try and treat human beings. See, labor law has moved far beyond, and especially in these communities in this diaspora, where slavery was so heavily, labor law has a strong human rights component. And it must represent the dignity and integrity of the person. And you can't treat people that way. And you must be realistic. If you can't do this, we can't do this. You work things out. It's the people's time. Thank you very much. I can say without hesitation, Mr. Speaker, that this very special cadre of public servants will not let the Bahamian people down. Mr. Speaker, you will recall that the member for East Grand Bahama, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, during his presentation of the 2017-2018 budget, introduced a number of revenue measures designed to, 1, provide prompt effect to some of our government commitments to the Bahamians, provide further tax relief to consumers and businesses through customs and excise duty rates reduction, and enhance administration and compliance in respect to our major taxes. Mr. Speaker, I propose to comment briefly on the following: the Tariff Amendment Bill 2017. The Tariff Amendment Bill 2017 seeks to amend the Tariff Act number 27 of 2013 to provide for the reduction of duties on certain imported goods. The Tariff Act provides for the imposition and collection of customs duties and gives effect to the harmonized system of tariffs. The Excise Amendment Bill 2017. The Excise Amendment Bill 2017 seeks to amend the Excise Act to reduce the taxes and duties on certain imported goods. The Excise Act provides for the importation and collection of excise taxes. The Stamp Amendment Bill 2017. The Stamp Amendment Bill 2017 seeks to address main issues. 1, to remove the provision for exemption on stamp duty on transferred mortgages on dwelling houses from Section 3B of the Stamp Act, which primarily deals with the exemption for first-time homeowners, and place it in Section 3C. This restructuring was done for the purpose of clarifying the criteria relating to an exemption on transfers. 2, to provide the establishment of a tier system as to how the exemptions are granted to the first homeowner based on the appraised value of the dwelling. Business License Amendment Act 2017 and the Business License Act. The Business License Act is another piece of legislation to be amended during the 2017-2018 budget exercise. The Business License Amendment Act 2016-17 seeks to accomplish various things, including the streamlining of business license tax, payment and clarifying provisions for taxpayers, convenience and understanding, as well as increasing efficiency in the operation of the Act. The Customs Management Act, the Customs Management Amendment Bill 2017. The Customs Department has sought to modernize its operation by the introduction of the Bahamas electronic single window, of which would allow for the electronic submission of documents and other declarations. Mr. Speaker, I propose to comment briefly on the Constituency Capital Grant Bill 2017. This bill is designed to govern the use by members of Parliament of their annual 100,000 constituency capital grant allocation. This government intends to do this by implementing rules and procedures to enhance accountability and transparency in government. Today, we see what was hereto an administrative action being codified in legislation, a law which now expressly sets standards and demands accountability to the people. So all we're saying is that if you get this, you're going to get the $100,000. For God's sakes, don't send it back. There are so many, pardon me? Yeah. Don't send it back. There are so many innovative programs that, absolutely, I'm getting to that. There are so many innovative programs that we can get together and involve the community in developing programs for young people, old people, education, women, children, men, so that we can properly, assist the community. And so, but one of the things you must be cognizant of, it requires strict accountability. So, and it will be audited by the Auditor General. And I know on social media I've been seeing this case that was going around from the CCJ, where you can sue parliamentarians when they do nonsense with the people's money. And I have a leader. I have a leader who's already started, and he said all parliamentarians must disclose. And I want to say publicly that the Attorney General and the Minister of State stands ready to do the people's business. That's right. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, all of us in this honorable House have a deep responsibility to the people we represent in our constituencies. Each of us, through the campaign season, made promises specific to our constituents that spoke to the challenges they face in their communities and to the ideals of better and more responsive governance. Mr. Speaker, the constituency of Yamacraw is full of potential because of its youth, beauty, and sense of community. And one of the things I value about Yamacraw, and I'm quite certain is all across the Bahamas, is the retired persons that we have in that community and how willing they are, if you engage them, to be a part of the process of mentorship for young people. One of my most empowering discussions that I had when I went into to Yamacraw actually happened along the strip in Commonwealth Boulevard. And I met some young men, and they may look a little rough around the edges. And we sat and we had an excellent discussion. And out of that discussion came a deep sense of appreciation for the youth. Some of them had made mistakes in their lives that they did not want to see for their children and for their sons. And they spoke about cultural events, some of whom could not read, spoke about how do we assess, and they didn't put it in the words that I'm putting it in now, but how do we assess our young people to ensure that they have basic arithmetic skills, English skills, that they understand our culture. And this is all in the context of when we just came off we were going through Junkanoo Carnival. You hear these guys saying, I'm not interested in that. How do we involve them in the economic life of a country? How do we do that? And so a part of that discussion was how do we build capacity in the communities, and I want to thank the community of Yamacraw for that. As a representative for Yamacraw, I intend to use my time in office to magnify this potential through a number of community initiatives. First, Mr. Speaker, I intend to focus my attention on the youth of Yamacraw, and that has been so fascinating for me to go around. And what I deliberately did, as I met grown folk, and they had children, especially the ones in the high school, I said, do you have any questions for your intended MP? And obviously, the majority would say, no, I don't. And I said, you don't have any questions about the environment? Tell me what's happening in school. Tell me about the structure or the facilities. And all of a sudden, conversations start to come up about young girls, how they're abused, how older men take advantage of them. We have to get in this community. There are a lot of social ills that we have to address. If we want to see crime come down, we have to get to them between conception and age 9. And then we have to do some more wise thinking even before conception to make sure you don't deal with somebody, you know. But we have to get to them between that age. That's when their cognitive abilities are being developed. And that's when we must see in them their potential. That's when we must see the garbage men, the fishermen, the doctors, and allow them to dream. Allow them to dream about China, allow them to dream about Australia, about Africa, but not only that, to create in them or to cause them to be able to actualize those dreams. Can you imagine during the slave trades and all that, when they thought about one day we will sit in this parliament? Just in the 50s, say the 20s, somebody, Haitian origin, someone from Cat Island in Inagua, in order to build this society, we must not look at them as because, oh, this is so-and-so son, or that's so-and-so son. We must look at them as human beings and say, I could see it in you, and pull that out of them. And so I intend, my party intend to work with the young people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these young men just want to know that there is someone listening to them and to help in their little ways that makes their lives better. The young people in our communities are vulnerable and are in need of support. Therefore, I plan to organize the community to adopt the primary school in the area so that we can assist the school and the young people who really need it in its daily operations. This will mean helping to provide books, keeping the school maintained, and supporting staff and teachers in their work. I am also proposing fundraisers for scholarships and facilitating basic needs of the school. As the Member of Parliament, I intend to assist with after-school programs and other initiatives that create positive outlets for young people in the community, whether that is through cultural programs or much-needed mentorship and career development. Mr. Speaker, the beauty of Yamacraw cannot continue to be marred by the stain of illegal dumping and derelict vehicles. Yep. And I listened to the Minister of Environment, yes, who said that there are 90,000, 80,000 derelict vehicles in New Providence. That's right. and the Minister and the Member for Finance is right, and several thousand of those cars are in Yamacraw. And the constituents of Yamacraw are concerned about it. And there are laws that govern it. And so, as I said before, my party will be engaged in the community through town meetings and through educational endeavors to educate them on these things. And there are laws that govern these vehicles. And so I would advise persons to make every attempt to move them, or they shall be removed. I am proposing a neighborhood-wide cleanup initiative that can restore Yamacraw's beauty and ensure that the environment is safe and healthy for my constituents. Mr. Speaker, while Yamacraw is a close-knit community, that sense of community has been shattered in recent times. by a string of house breakings and even muggings of walkers and joggers in the morning and evening hours. I believe that we can leverage the sense of community that makes Yamacraw so special by facilitating the creation of a crime prevention initiative led by members of the community and stewarded by the police. Mr. Speaker, in addition to this, I will also advocate for the police to be more visible in the area, to discourage those who seek to commit crimes against the person and perpetrate and properties of the Yamacraw residents. To keep the constituency of Yamacraw informed, I also intend to create a website and communicate by social media so that we can keep them informed of events. And one of the things we must do is we must reward the accomplishment of not just young people, old, but persons who are up in age. And so if they run, you should know it. We have a lot of students over in college right now. And sometimes, and the reason why I told my story about my father and not being able to read and having to leave high school, because it highlights the whole issue that the Minister of Education has to deal with now. Social promotion. Grown persons are coming out, and it will be surprising to know how many of those students that we're graduating now don't have the basic working skills with English and math. 50%. And thank you very much, sir. And how do we expect them with such great expectation? You know, they come out unable to do certain basic things, and they still want to go to France. They still want a car. They still want a house. They want, you understand me? And so, and I don't stand here today insofar as a young nation. And when we speak about Sir Cecil, I think Sir Cecil was one of the first ministers of education. And when they spoke about empowering young people or empowering our people by putting schools on the islands and all those different things, for at this stage of our development, now we're supposed to be way beyond this. We have fallen down, and I'm not going to say, and I can't disassociate my party from this. We have a lot of work to do. And this is where we need agreement from, and I'm certain that we have it, from both sides of the floor, yes, to address this social ills. Yes. And I always, whenever I have the opportunity, I say it. There's a large segment of our community undocumented who are every much behemoth, who we have to focus on and deal with this problem. Right? Thank you very much. Thank you. That's right. And as the Minister for Zanan said, these are topics through town meetings, and I'm quite certain the other side will have their town meetings also, where we can no longer be afraid to address certain social issues. We can't be saying we want to put Bahamians first, and in some respects they're not qualified. My leader is saying it must be merit-based. So we must create an environment where we are creating world citizens, yes, to leave this country, to go abroad, to participate. And as the Minister of Education says, when you go abroad, get some scholarships, you send them back. You come back home. Absolutely. Mr. Speaker, on the 30th, on May 30th, the Free National Movement Constituency Association held its first meeting since the election, and to signal my desire to continuously listen and explore the issues the people of Yamacraw are facing, we are holding our first town hall meeting on the 20th of July. And I want to commend and thank Mr. George Capron, one of my father's best friends, and I call him my father's brother. He's a straight shooter, and he's assisting to organize this. And what I love about Mr. Capron is he says that I'm not F&M, I'm not PLP, I'm a Bahamian. And so when he told me of some of the persons that he's approached and who are preparing to come and have a discussion, an open and honest discussion, you know, I was excited. I was excited when I heard that the former president of the Court of Appeal may be coming to have a discussion with us. And the Prime Minister doesn't know it as yet, but we want him to just come and tell us about town meetings. That's right. Mr. Speaker, indeed, it gives me great pleasure to support the 2017-2018 budget presented by our government under the leadership of the Honorable Dr. Hubert A. Minister, Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. May God bless our stewardship of this country. May God bless the great constituency of Yamacraw, and may God continue to bless the great Commonwealth of the Bahamas. God bless you.
As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bain and Grantstown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the good people of Bains and Grantstown and young people throughout the Commonwealth to impart my contribution to the national discussion. First of all, I would like to take a moment to thank my Heavenly Father, Jesus Christ, who is and will always be the head of my life, for allowing me to stand here today. My parents, Maxine and Samuel Robinson, and Ian Seymour Bain, for their godly counsel and guidance throughout my childhood years. To the Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Hubert Minnis, a visionary leader who gave a young man like me the opportunity to be a part of his dynamic change team. I want to publicly thank you, sir, for opening the door of opportunity for me and being there every step of this journey whenever I needed you most. You are indeed my political role model and hero. Thank you, Mr. PM. To the world's greatest campaign team, led by my campaign manager, Diallo Roll, and volunteers from every walk of life. To intercessors and prayer warriors throughout this nation and around the world, those of whom have kept me in their prayers. To my mentors, benefactors, supporters, family, and friends, I thank you all for playing a pivotal role in ensuring that mine is the voice that echoed these hallowed halls on behalf of the great people of Bains and Grantstown. I would also like to take a moment to appreciate the solidarity that the young generation has shown during this past election season. Across the archipelago, I have felt the enthusiasm that my candidacy has inspired amongst youth throughout the nation. I thank you all for the heartfelt gestures of encouragement and the support throughout the past few months. This is more than just an electoral victory. It is a victory for all Bahamian youth, and a testament that this administration and this nation is ready to recognize the enormous contribution that young people can make at the highest levels. To all the young people for whom my victory has served as a source of inspiration, especially for our young men, some of whom are consistently challenged by the pressures of their environment to give in and to follow the crowd. I urge you to remain focused, determined, and to follow your dreams. To the youth of our nation from humble beginnings, who see a bit of themselves in me, one such person being 21 years old, Daquan Swain from East Grand Bahama, who, like me, has a deep sense of love and passion for his community. Daquan is running to become the local government representative for East Grand Bahama. And so it is indeed my privilege to fully endorse a young man like him with great vision and energy. And I call upon the residents of East Grand Bahama to give Mr. Daquan Sween your full support at the polls on election day. My young people, it is indeed my hope that I will make each of you proud in this honorable house. Mr. Speaker, permit me at this time to get down to business. The Bahamas is at a crossroad as a nation, with mounting debt, a stagnant economy, an insufficient job market, and a struggling educational system. We have endured some hard times as a nation, and those hard times have only been intensified by the poor stewardship of the past 5 years. If the results of the recent general election have taught us anything, it is this: the Bahamian people are tired of business as usual in their government. The problem is that business as usual usually just benefits a selected few in this country. We all know who they are: the vampire elites, or the all-for-me baby school of governance, selfishly gorging themselves on the resources of this nation. A select few whose actions suggest a belief that they and they alone are entitled to the riches of this country. Mr. Speaker, business as usual for this group typically means a complete lack of accountability for slackness and misconduct in government. It means shady business deals, selling away our birthright in exchange for their personal fortune. No wonder they resisted all protests and petitions demanding transparency and a return on the Freedom of Information Act. But I understand, Mr. Speaker, because no man in his rightful mind would willingly agree to expose the skeletons in his closet. Mr. Speaker, on May 10, 2017, the Bahamian people united and spoke with a loud voice, saying, "Enough is enough." And I was proud to have stood with them as we rejected the notion of 5 more years of lackluster, destructive governance. A little over a month ago, the people of this country delivered a resounding message to the government of the day, a message that they are tired of the corruption and self-centeredness of political elites in this country, and they are tired of the gross mismanagement of our precious resources by the ones they've put in charge to be stalwarts over our economy. There's a new breed of Bahamians rising up, a new generation of which I am a part, and we are not willing to accept greed and incompetence as part of our political and governmental processes. When people tell us that's just the way it is, we respond with defiance in the face of that culture of quiet resignation and blind loyalty that has characterized so many others in this generation past. In that regard, I believe that the young people of the Bahamas have set the tone for the direction in which our nation is headed in. After all, people 18 to 35 make up the largest voting bloc in this country. We, along with many others, were able to send a message throughout all corners of the Bahamas that we expect excellence from our government, not excuses. That we are looking for men and women of substance to lead this nation, leaders who will speak through their actions. And we refuse to let sweet talk and false promises sway us anymore. Mr. Speaker, there's a general public acknowledgement that the country has been headed in the wrong direction for a number of years. And while many people are understanding of the unique challenges brought upon us ever since the global recession, there is a reasonable expectation by the Bahamian people that the leadership team they elect will rise to meet and overcome these challenges. In my conversation with constituents in Bain and Grantstown, whom I am both honored and privileged to serve, in my capacity as their Member of Parliament, I have heard echoes of the same conversations that have been happening around the country. The people of this country have prioritized a few things, Mr. Speaker. One, greater transparency and accountability within their government. No more secret deals and wrist slaps in lieu of real disciplinary measures. Two, a safer, more secure Bahamas, especially in inner cities of New Providence, where the scourge of crime has ravaged many families. Three, more robust job creations at all levels of employment. Four, a 21st century educational system that equips our youth with the skills they need to be positive contributors to our economy. And five, balanced approach to the fiscal management that takes into account the rise in national debt and annual budgetary deficits, while also taking into account the burden of taxes on the middle class and the poor. I believe that the proposed budget does an excellent job of addressing many of the pillars of good, innovative governance as outlined in our 2017 manifesto. Mr. Speaker, it is clear to the Bahamian people that this government, under the leadership of the Right Honorable Dr. Hubert Minnis, is a government of action. Already, in these few weeks of governance, Bahamian people are already observing the strides we have made towards greater accountability and governance. Indeed, I believe that the ongoing audits within every ministry should have anyone whose hand was in the cookie jar shaking in their boots. The Bahamian people are taking notes, and for the first time in a long time, many people are seeing the faintest glimmer of hope on the horizon. And hope, Mr. Speaker, has often been a luxury many people could not afford during the past 5 years. But people are feeling optimistic about the prospects of the new direction. They are feeling the new wave of energy ushered in by the changing of government. And I'm feeling it too, Mr. Speaker. The winds are at our backs, and we will use this momentum to reverse the curse of the past 5 years and get this country back on track. However, I do not wish to downplay the difficulty of this monumental task before us. Since 2012, our gross national income has consistently declined year over year, with a total decrease of nearly 2,000 per capita, according to the World Bank data. During the same time, after experiencing a period of growth of nearly 1,000 in our relative purchasing power per capita in 2012, we underwent a series of declines that has resulted in the average GDP per capita, when adjusted for purchasing power parity relative to global averages, actually falling by nearly $2,000 per person. According to IMF data, regional countries that rank higher than us in per capita purchasing power include Puerto Rico, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Bermuda, and Trinidad and Tobago. This indicates that not only has our economy been stagnant in real terms, but comparatively speaking, due to our rising cost of living and stagnant economy and wages, the average Bahamian has less purchasing power than the average Trinidadian. Meanwhile, the unemployment rate is still hovering in double-digit range, and the discouraged worker rate remains unacceptably high. This is not to mention the countless number of underpaid and underemployed people who are struggling to make ends meet through whatever means they can. The gross incompetence and fiscal mismanagement that has led to this state of affairs must be reversed. But one does not have to pay attention to the international statistics to be aware of the tough times that this country has been going through. One simply has to take a walk through the constituency of Bain and Grantstown and talk to some of my people. As a young man who grew up in Bain and Grantstown constituency, never before have I seen my people in such dire straits. These have not been easy times for the people of Bain and Grantstown constituency. But in true Bahamian fashion, Mr. Speaker, we never gave up. Every day, the people of Bain and Grantstown demonstrate tremendous amounts of resilience as they cope with the everyday struggle of making rent payments, putting food on the table, raising their children and guiding them along the path of righteousness and keeping loved ones safe. I know the Bain and Grantstown community has never been exactly a financially rich community, but there is a time, Mr. Speaker, not so long ago, when the people of Bain and Grantstown, like the rest of the Bahamas, benefited from a growing economy with enough jobs for any able-bodied man or woman who truly wanted to work. During this time, Bahamians had become accustomed to a certain quality of life and having a certain level of pride and dignity in our ability to provide financially for ourselves. I have personally witnessed the restlessness as my people have waited for the end of this economic slump that has lingered for far too long. I am here today to tell them that the people's government is doing its endeavor best to make life better for all Bahamians. And as the Member of Parliament for Bain and Grantstown, it is my honor to champion the cause for my people, to ensure that they benefit from the progress that will doubtlessly accompany the innovative and decisive leadership of this FNM administration. In keeping with the government's commitment to the socio-economic development of our local communities, I am continuing to work diligently towards fulfilling my campaign promises of launching a multifaceted community center for the empowerment of the people of Bain and Grantstown. This center will provide economic, social, and emotional support to the people of Bain and Grantstown. I am talking about a community hub that can play host to math classes, counseling, mentorship, computer classes, parenting, and fitness classes. This will be the venue for community events. Already existing community clubs and NGOs and town hall meetings where neighbors can come together and discuss their issues pertinent to them. I want the people of Bain and Grantstown to know that I am actively working towards mobilizing resources to ensure that this community center will become a reality and will be laying the groundwork to fulfill this campaign promise in short order. In the meantime, my team and I are continuing to hit the streets, working diligently at our community cleanup initiative, the launch of Operation Beautiful Bain and Grantstown, as we try to make Bain and Grantstown the cleanest constituency in the Bahamas, one street at a time. I am truly humbled by the overwhelming amount of support I've received from the people of Bain and Grantstown throughout the campaign, and even now as their Member of Parliament. My people have truly embraced me, letting me into their homes, and have spoken quite frankly to me about not only the affairs of the direction that the country is heading, but also their hopes and dreams for a better future. I was particularly honored to have the support of one of Bain and Grantstown's oldest residents, a powerful matriarch of our community, Mama Ruth, who has given me her enthusiastic support since the start of the campaign. In her many years of wisdom and experience, she could tell that it was time for change in Bain Town and a time for change in our country. It is always a beautiful thing when the leaders of today can provide wise counsel and support for the up-and-coming leaders of tomorrow. I believe that the leaders of the past administration could have taken a cue from Mama Ruth and learned how to empower the new generation of leaders. I am here to do my best to fight for my people, regardless of party affiliation. There's only one Bain and Grantstown constituency, and we are all facing the same challenges and going through the same trials. Likewise, we also share in our victories and triumphs. I think that is one of the major strong points of this FNM administration, compared to the other guys. We understand that there is a time for politics and a time for governance, and are capable of separating the two in a way that these other guys just couldn't seem to do. Mr. Speaker, during the campaign, there was much excitement generated by the announcement of tax-free zones being established in the over-the-hill communities to stimulate economic activities in areas like Bain and Grantstown that need it the most. I know that such changes to the revenue model of the government requires a delicate and measured touch to ensure that both the government and the local communities are made stronger as a result. Consequently, in consideration of the budget deficit that must be covered unexpectedly due to the woefully inadequate projections made by the past administration, it is necessary for this government to stabilize our state of affairs before launching some of our core initiatives. However, I have absolute faith in our ability to fulfill such promise, and I, along with the people of Bain and Grantstown, am looking forward to the future updates on this initiative. Another initiative that is of great interest to the constituents of Bain and Grantstown is the expansion of entrepreneur loans and creation of further incentives, especially for small and medium-sized business owners, to promote economic activity within the over-the-hill areas and also drive ownership and employment in the inner city New Providence. I have long held the belief that the key to diversifying our economy is driving economic growth and job creation is to empower Bahamian entrepreneurs and allow them to be the drivers of innovation within our economy. Ideally, the role of the government is not, as some seem to think, to come up with the ideas to save the populace, but rather a good government invests in its people, enabling them to come up with solutions to their own problems. I think a good analogy that contrasts the approach of this government from the prior government is the old adage about giving a man a fish versus teaching him how to fish. Mr. Speaker, perhaps the single most socially damaging issue for the people in the community I represent has been the record-setting rates of crime and violence that have occurred over the past 5 years. Fortunately, in the Minister of National Security, my colleague, the Honorable Member for Mount Moriah, we have a seasoned veteran of the police force who understands what is necessary to properly equip our men and women in the front line to combat crime, but also what is needed systematically in regard to cooperation with the AG's office and the courts, as well as the prison, in order to efficiently and effectively process perpetrators through our justice system with a view towards deterring future crimes and reducing the recidivism rate for repeat offenders. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamian people, including the good people of Bain and Grantstown constituency, are watching with keen interest as the government develops its approach to leveraging public-private partnership to promote sustainable growth of the private sector. This government is not merely interested in artificially blustering its employment numbers through temporary employment schemes, although such initiatives have their place, especially when it comes to the training of unskilled workers to make them more competitive within the job market. But what the government is interested in, and what I believe the majority of the Bahamian people are interested in, is not a few days of work or a few weeks of employment, but opportunities for long-term, sustainable, stable employment. Already, we are seeing the first step towards a pro-business, consumer-friendly tax regime that will prove beneficial to business owners and the general populace alike, with the reduction of business license tax from 2.5% to 1.5%, and the removal of duties on numerous essential medical equipment, the elimination or reduction of duties on a number of grocery, personal care, household, and construction items, consumers can expect to see these savings passed on to them in the forms of reduced price at checkout lines, and business owners will be able to more adequately outfit their premises, as well as, in the case of relevant retailers, fully stock their shelves in anticipation of the increased demand in response to the decrease in price. Ultimately, Mr. Speaker, the end result is more economic activity to stimulate private sector and promote growth. There are good days ahead of the people of the Bahamas under this FNM government. Mr. Speaker, as a young Bahamian with aspirations of building a career within the tourism and hospitality sector, I have a personal stake in ensuring that our track record of success as a leading tourist destination in the region is preserved for future generations. As a former Junior Minister of Tourism, and in my current capacity as Parliamentary Secretary at the Ministry of Tourism and Aviation, I have seen firsthand an amazing tourism product that we have cultivated over the years that has yielded such great prosperity for this tiny little nation and has become a juggernaut of sorts within the region. To say that hospitality and tourism-related activities are the lifeblood of our economy, Mr. Speaker, I believe is an understatement. Recent estimates place the amount of people directly employed in the hospitality and tourism-related jobs at nearly 50% of our total job market, with an additional 20% of jobs created indirectly as a result of the economic activities generated by the sector. That is nearly 70% of all working Bahamians employed as a result of the tourism industry. Needless to say, it is imperative that we take good care of this industry to ensure a more prosperous Bahamas. All Bahamians understand the important role that tourism plays within our economy. So it is disheartening and a little frightening, Mr. Speaker, that when it came to negotiating one of the largest tourism-related deals that this nation has ever seen, the previous administration so badly dropped the ball, not just when it came to ensuring that a solution was agreed upon in a timely manner, but also in the way they allowed the prospects of personal gain to triumph the goal of national development. Conflict of interest abounded, and it was all done with an utter disregard for transparency and respect for the Bahamian people. What makes this so sad is that the Bahama Resort is such a promising development for this nation. Initial projections indicate the kind of economy boosting impact that the Bahama was estimated to have, contributing over 3,000 jobs to Bahamians from all income brackets, while projected to make up over 10% of our GDP. Over the next 20 years, Bahama was projected to generate over $20 billion in employment income, $25 billion in visitor spending, and $5.5 billion in governmental revenue. Obviously, it is essential to the long-term sustainability of our economy that the Bahama project begins to fulfill its potential in the near future. With the elections passed and the pressure of rushing to open its doors to meet politically motivated deadlines now alleviated, the new government must now work along with the Bahama team to ensure that a sustainable plan is created to fully launch this major investment and move it along from its current 25% occupancy rate to a level that is consistent with industry averages. The anticipated impact of Bahama is so great that it motivated S&P to delay our credit rating downgrade to junk status a few months before the inevitable occur. Likewise, Mr. Speaker, Moody's has held off on downgrading our credit rating to junk status due to the estimated impact that Bahamas will have when fully operational. Luckily, Mr. Speaker, the country now has a capable team on the ground to oversee this process. Allow me to say that again, Mr. Speaker. Luckily, the country now has a capable team on the ground to oversee this process. Under the leadership of the Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Dr. Hubert Minnis, along with my business-savvy colleague, the Honorable Member for Freetown, the Honorable Denisio Diagula, Minister of Transport and Aviation with responsibility for Bahamas here, along tourism and aviation, along with myself as Parliamentary Secretary, fully expect to see the turnaround that so many people have been counting on to boost our economy. But this is not a simple case of if you build it, they will come, as so many seem to think, Mr. Speaker. There are far greater issues with our tourism product that we must address in order to continue our success in the tourism sector. A part of the problem, as noted recently by the IMF in a recent paper, is that the Bahamas tourism industry has remained stagnant over the past 2 decades. During that time period, Cuba's tourist arrival grew by 7.6%, the Dominican Republic grew by 5.6%, and the entire region grew by an average of 4%. Meanwhile, the Bahamas market growth has remained relatively flat. This is particularly worrisome because for a long time, the Caribbean and Latin America as a destination has been involved in a zero-sum game of sort in which any increases in one particular country is usually reflected by a corresponding decrease in other areas of the region. With the fierce competition that has been going on within the region, the stakes have become that much higher when it came to growing our market share. A part of the reason for this has been the fact that, as noted in the IMF paper, the number of available rooms in our country has remained relatively flat for the past decade. Yes, this will be alleviated somewhat by the 2,300 rooms that will be made available once the Bahama Resort is fully operational. However, it is integral that this increase in room availability is accompanied by a corresponding strategic push to expand our market share in order to ensure that we do not create a situation in which Bahama is cannibalizing the domestic market, something that an industry giant like Atlantis could survive and compete with, but would completely decimate small to medium-sized resorts without the huge marketing budget, tax breaks, incentives, and governmental cooperation that Bahama currently enjoys. If we want this major development to not just be successful as a business, but also prove to be a net positive for the country, we must shake ourselves out of the doldrums and begin to make headway into increasing our market share. The IMF paper went on to detail the fact that the Bahamas had failed to capitalize on the fastest growing tourism market in the Caribbean region, the Canadian market. In fact, over the past 25 years, the Bahamas market share of the Canadian market had fallen from 10% to 4% in the region. This indicates that the Canadian economy, that as the Canadian economy strengthened, we failed to be as appealing a destination to these new travelers as some of our regional neighbors, namely Cancun and the Dominican Republic, both of whom make up a whopping 54% of the Canadian tourist market in the region. In fact, the Bahamas has shown the least growth of any country in the entire region during the 20th year period. Some people consider us, and I do emphasize some people, Mr. Speaker, to be the region's biggest loser. Our inability to diversify and take advantage of this emerging market is worrisome to say the least. And quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, I do not like to lose. But how do we expect to be competitive when we have relied on the same basic tourism model for the past 50 years? Even then, we hit the geography jackpot with our close proximity to the U.S., especially after the travel ban on Cuba in the 1950s. Coincidentally enough, the IMF has attributed the Cuba embargo as the single greatest stimulus to our tourism market, indicating that our market grew by more than 500% from 1954 to 1968. With the relaxed posture the U.S. has taken with Cuba in recent years, we are entering uncharted waters in which this decades of old model will be put to the test against. I'm not sure how many people remember the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association paper back in 2015 that argued that as much as 20% of our domestic market was up for grabs with the emergence of Cuba as a destination with the close proximity to the Bahamas to take away a significant percentage of the impulse traveling market from the southeastern United States. With Cuba and our other regional competitors stepping their game up, Mr. Speaker, the time has come for us to step our game up as well. The answer, of course, is that we cannot continue business as usual. We must strengthen what we have and expand beyond our current strategies. Our issue is definitely not a lack of resources. It is a lack of the most strategic use of resources we have. This requires data-backed innovation and out-of-the-box problem solving at unprecedented levels. Mr. Speaker, luckily, there is an already existing infrastructure to build on as well. When it comes to reaching out to emerging markets, for example, the Ministry of Tourism maintains foreign offices throughout the world, including the United States, like Florida, Washington, New York, Los Angeles, Texas, and Atlanta, and also has a presence in Canada, England, France, Italy, China, and Latin America to ensure local engagement with potential visitors and partners. These offices also ensure that our marketing efforts reach its intended audience. With this kind of already established global outreach, with continued support and strategic investment in these offices and others like them, we have a direct means of communication to create culturally relevant, targeted marketing messages that resonate with the local populace. Mr. Speaker, economic diversification continues to be a much discussed topic locally. Often proponents of economic diversification speak of a need for us to move away from our over-reliance on the two major industries and focus on a broad array of industries that would make us more resilient in the face of economic turmoil, especially when it comes to industries like agriculture and fisheries that has helped to reduce the imports while also making us more self-efficient as a country. However, it should be duly noted that regaining our leadership role within the regional tourism sector and diversifying our economy are not mutually exclusive activities. In fact, one of the major priorities of this administration is to further diversify the Bahamas tourism product. As an archipelago nation, we are uniquely positioned to provide completely different experiences depending on the island one visits. From a natural resource perspective, around which infrastructure is usually built, in Bimini, we have the best large marine animal dive site in the world. In Inagua, we have the largest West Indian flamingo flock in the world. In Exuma, we have swimming with the pigs. In Andros, we have one of the largest natural fish nursery system in the world. In Long Island, we have Dean's Blue Hole. On Bryland, we have the Pink Sand, and countless other examples of our natural riches as a nation. Unique experiences that each appeal to different niche markets for tourism that collectively represent tens of millions of dollars of untapped potential revenue. And I've not even mentioned the Bahamian people yet, Mr. Speaker, our culture, music, festivals, food, language, or even the arts. Over the course of the next 5 years, the Ministry of Tourism and Aviation will be committed to investing in marketing and infrastructure to ensure that we begin to create unique destination experiences for profitable niche markets such as ecotourism, marine tourism, and bone fishing. I should note that, relatively speaking, what I am calling a niche market within the context of global tourism can actually prove to be quite profitable for a small country like ours. For example, in the Florida Keys, flat fisheries as an has an economic impact of over $220 million in a relatively small area of Florida, which has flats that are smaller and less populated than ours. Yet the total economic impact of flat fisheries in the Bahamas is less than half of this amount. We have all the resources we need to compete on an international level in regards to this industry. We simply need a sound marketing strategy with a targeted message, infrastructural development, and financial incentives to encourage entrepreneurship and innovation within the field. This example is just one illustration of many to demonstrate just what an abundance of riches we have in regards to potential experiences for visitors. The Ministry of Tourism and Aviation intends to explore ways to leverage these strengths as part of our diversification strategy. One specific area within the ministry that we must focus on to ensure that we are getting visitors to visit our beautiful family islands is through working closely with the ministry's airlift development unit to ensure that flight coverage coincides with our marketing strategies and areas of investment. This is vital, Mr. Speaker. There is no tourism product without the ability to get people to the destination in a timely, cost-effective way. We must invest in and build upon the work of the Domestic Tourism and Family Island Development Department and the many family island offices, as well as the Sustainable Tourism Unit, to ensure that the most feasible data-backed opportunities are prioritized. The Grand Bahama office, in particular, will play a pivotal role in working towards the government's vision to promote Grand Bahama as a leading destination for TV and movie-related projects. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to missed opportunities to show off what makes the Bahamas the best travel destination in the region, nowhere is our stagnation more evident when a tourist steps away from the controlled environment of a cruise ship or resort and decides to venture into New Providence. Well, even before they step off the cruise ship, Mr. Speaker, they are greeted with posted crime warnings from the U.S. and Canada embassies warning their citizens to be careful while visiting New Providence. These warnings are only further justified when one looks into the relatively high number of reported thefts, harassments, and assaults that are reported by tourists visiting New Providence. We must ask ourselves, Mr. Speaker, how are tourists feeling when they step into New Providence? What are they seeing? Is it something that we can be proud of? And is it something that can exceed what can be offered by other destinations? Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas is a high-end destination. It costs a lot to visit and stay here. And it is important that the perceived value derived from a stay here is greater than the actual cost of staying here. This means that we must not only get the basic right, things like safety, a clean environment, well-trained and hospitable staff, adequate infrastructure and technology, but we must also offer those things that make us uniquely Bahamian. This is why investment into our heritage and culture is so important from a tourism perspective. Our best value proposition is one that balances the familiar with the exotic, one that provides comfort while also introducing the visitors to novel experiences, one that is universally relatable but still captures the essence of what it means to be in the Bahamas and experience our people, our language, our music, dance, food, art, and our history, and all of the beautiful things that makes us uniquely Bahamian. This will be the key to our continued revitalization and redevelopment of the downtown area, especially the Festival Place Welcome Center, where we can make our first impression a lasting one. When fully implemented, think about the impact it will have on our capital city, the income generated from merchandise and food sales, the jobs created and governmental revenue collected. In this area, we must continue to support and guide the work of the Product Development Department, the ministry's main driver of tourist-related product development within the Bahamas. Particularly, we must work along with the Authentic Bahamian Unit and its work with the craft and souvenir industry, the Sites and Facilities Unit and its work in identifying areas of need within the ministry, and the Tour and Transportation Unit and its work in preserving and promoting our heritage, the Reception Service Unit and its role in informing that first lasting impression when guests are welcomed for the first time to the Bahamas, and the Culinary Tourism Unit, which promote the development and exposure of our tourism-related culinary products. Mr. Speaker, the common thread tying all of this together is the collection of accurate data from the international and domestic markets, from potential visitors and current visitors alike. The Research, Statistics, and Immigration Screening Department plays the pivotal role in ensuring that all of these decisions are in keeping with the feedback we are getting about our product. This information is then gathered and acted upon by the various departments within my ministry. We must ensure that we continue to invest in this area and expand our capabilities for data collection, with accuracy being our main objective. I hope I've been able to enlighten not just regarding the current issues and opportunities presented within the tourism sector, but also in regard to the many different parts of the Ministry of Tourism and how this complex networks of units and departments must come together to form a cohesive whole, minimizing bureaucracy and increasing efficiency in order to become the well-oiled machine that we must be in order to remain competitive internationally. Mr. Speaker, the team at the Ministry of Tourism and Aviation, along with our Minister, the Honorable Dionisio de Aguilar, is fired up and ready to go. There are a lot of exciting challenges ahead of us, and the Bahamian people are far more confident now that we have a government that has stacked its reputation on good fiscal management, sound business practices, and innovative solutions in the driver's seat of our #1 industry. Mr. Speaker and members of this Honorable House of Assembly, we are witnessing the end of business as usual and ushering in a new paradigm. Everywhere I go, whether it's walking downtown or waiting on the food store line, I am hearing the constant refrain, it's the people's time. People are daring to hope again for a better, more prosperous future for themselves and their loved ones. This excitement is a beautiful thing, Mr. Speaker. Ironically, this new paradigm that we are ushering in, it's nothing really new, you know, Mr. Speaker. It's called having integrity, something that many Bahamians feel was woefully lacking during the past 5 years. With this return towards integrity in governance, it is refreshing to see a government that finally means what it says and says what it means and goes on to back up those words with meaningful and decisive actions, because this F&M administration understands that is what real leadership is about. Not empty platitudes or soaring speeches, but the execution of our mandate and the execution of the collective vision for a better Bahamas. This is why on May 10, 2017, the Bahamian people voted for a change in direction. They voted for visionary leadership that they thought would be best equipped to restore their faith in the Bahamian dream. But we are not here to maintain our election victory hype or to play party politics. The real work starts now. And I believe that this F&M administration is more capable of leading this country towards a better future for all Bahamians. Mr. Speaker, as we say in the Ministry of Tourism and Aviation, it's better in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker and members of this Honorable House of Assembly, it is indeed my prayer that God will bless you all, and God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I yield the floor.
As many? The chair recognizes the honourable member for North Abaco.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in this place today to deliver my maiden remarks in this honourable House as we present the 2017-2018 budget for the ministry for which I have responsibility, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and on behalf of the resilient, industrious people of North Abaco, whom I'm honored to serve in this place. Romans 13 teaches that there is no authority except from God, and those that exist are established by God. In this vein, I thank Almighty God for his grace and favor bestowed upon me and my party, and I am acutely aware that without his grace and mercy, I would not be standing before you today in the capacity of the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Simply put, God has been good to this island boy. Mr. Speaker, today I acknowledge the people of North Abaco with deep humility and gratitude. I do so because of the complete trust and confidence that they have placed in me. And this I say with no sense of hubris, but to inform those who do not know that mine has been a life of service to my beloved country. Spending nearly 36 years in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, along with a short stint in the Office of the Attorney General in Legal Affairs. Mr. Speaker, I must say this though. I would have achieved very little in my life without the unbreakable love and support of my wife of 32 years, Deidre. She has been and continues to be my North Star. She is the mother of my 3 sons, and you know, she had a view of these remarks, and she's an Abaco woman. And if you had one of those, if you have one of those, you know that they take their liberties. She's from Sandy Point. And she adjusted my remarks because I didn't mention the names of our sons. And so she sends me a note from my North Star. She's the mother of my 3 sons, Darren, Deshiko, and Drayon, and the grandmother of my 1 granddaughter, Dahlia, the boss of my life. I must also acknowledge my father, Bishop Clifford Henfield, and my deceased mother, Evelyn Cornish Henfield, for their support and encouragement throughout my formative years. Mr. Speaker, I struggled a few days ago when I realized that I had come to this noble and honorable place, having lost my mother in last September. It was a difficult realization for me, but I know that she's looking down from heaven and smiling upon her eldest son here today, and for that I'm grateful. I wish to publicly thank my siblings and other relatives for their unwavering love and support, which seemed particularly pronounced during the recent campaign in North Abaco. My campaign team could never be thanked enough for their commitment, their dedication, and their will to return the Free National Movement to the governance of this country. I wish also to publicly thank the Honorable Prime Minister for the trust and confidence reposed in me to manage the very important office which directs and advises on the foreign policy of this country. You know, I was asked recently how I felt about being in this place, and I said my experience is surreal because I believe that I am living the Bahamian dream. Not only others have dreams, you know, and I hope that many of us who sit in this place for the first time would realize that perhaps we inspire others to dream as well. You know, a short 6 months ago, I was sitting in an office in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. And because of the courage of the now Prime Minister and those who influenced this process, I now stand in this honorable place as a member of the Cabinet of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And so, Prime Minister, at risk of appearing sycophantic, I say that the trust reposed in me and others in this place must never be disregarded, disrespected, or ignored. And as such, I will do my best each day to live up to your expectations in the service of the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Now, finally, in this regard, I am keenly aware that as only the 2nd member of this place to represent the F&M from North Abaco, I have a tremendous responsibility. Moreover, I follow a former Prime Minister whose service to this nation and representation on behalf of the people of North Abaco are arguably unmatched by any other Prime Minister in the modern history of this country. You know, in my service in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, I've had an opportunity to travel all across this country. And I have seen constituencies led by former Prime Ministers. I am yet to find one that represents the true leadership that we saw from the Right Honorable Hubert Alexander Ingram in North Abaco for nearly 40 years. Mr. Speaker, I must tell you, though, that he also remains readily available for advice and guidance in this new life upon which I have embarked. For this, I am grateful. I wish also to extend Happy Father's Day to all Bahamian fathers who have the honor and the privilege of being fathers. I also extend congratulations to Megan St. Claude. I know the Honorable Minister of Education attended their graduation service in Abaco, in North Abaco on Monday. And I had an opportunity to speak with Megan on Monday morning and to encourage her in her pursuits of higher education. I wish only to say to her that we are so pleased and so encouraged that she was chosen as the valedictorian for the process. And she is from Sherlin C. Boodle High School in Cooperstown. And I wish to applaud her parents for their consistency in pushing and prodding her to do her best in academics. This is very important. Now, Psalms 51, Mr. Speaker, you know you have a lot of preachers in this place. And preachers don't do much without the scriptures. Psalms 51 and 17 teaches that the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit and a contrite heart. It goes on to say, the broken and contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise. I say that to say this. Despite having been soundly rejected by the Bahamian people on May 10th, which happens to be the anniversary of the sinking of HMBS Flamingo, the reason why I actually joined the Defense Force, me and many others, which resulted in the loss of 4 young Bahamian Marines, and has now become representative of the survival of 4 on the other side, it is astounding to me. It is astounding to me that the former government of this country seemed to wish Bahamians to believe and accept that they played no role in bringing this country near its knees economically. I speak of a government which presided over an unprecedented 4 downgrades of our sovereign credit rating in a single term, despite collecting more than $1 billion in new revenue in the form of value-added tax. A government which did not build one school, not one clinic or airport, now comes to this place and say, fix it, find it. No contrition. The Bahamian people have sent us here to fix it. And by the help of Almighty God, fix it we will. Mr. Speaker, we will fix it by returning discipline to the way public expenditure is managed. We will fix it by mitigating to the best of our ability the waste of public funds. We will fix it by the enforcement of efforts aimed at collecting the people's money from all Bahamians and not just a selected few. We will fix it because we have no other alternative. We will fix it because our children and our grandchildren depend on us to preserve their God-given right to a future in a country that gives them the same opportunities that it has given to so many of us, even to those on the side opposite. And so I too will take this opportunity to congratulate the Honorable Minister responsible for finance for his dexterity and creativity in putting together a pragmatic and reasonably achievable budget that speaks to a new era in public sector accountability of our finances and a return to transparency in the management of the people's business. Mr. Speaker, this is a government in the sunshine. We believe in accountability and transparency in the way that the business of the people is conducted. Now I move to foreign policy and our place in the world. Mr. Speaker, scholars assert that foreign policy is achieved through diplomacy, which is described by Stowe's Diplomatic Practice 6th edition as the conduct of official relations between the governments of independent states, extending sometimes also to their relations to dependent territories, between governments and international institutions, or more briefly, the conduct of business between states by peaceful means. Toward this end, the foreign policy of the Bahamas, which is conducted through diplomacy in many far-flung regions of the world, must be guided by the government's goals and aspirations for the realization of a more secure and economically viable Bahamas. As foreshadowed in the speech from the throne, we seek to address unemployment, poverty, economic development, trade, and the promotion of investments in the Bahamas. These aspirations will only be achievable through the enhancement of strategic partnerships with the objective of advancing our national interest in this regard. As a small and yet developing island state, we must, of necessity, support the promotion and protection of the rule of law, democratic principles, and the maintenance of human rights, whilst simultaneously pursuing our national goals in the global arena. Mr. Speaker, I come to this office with a wealth of experience. The things that I have seen throughout my profession in an operational perspective, I come with the ability to bring to the practical approach that we must address, and many of the issues as they relate to cross-border or transnational threats to our national security. Issues such as illegal migration, issues such as unregulated and unwanted poaching within our waters. And so our focus, Mr. Speaker, will be to do things that will directly address the remediation of these problems, the mitigation of these problems, as they challenge the prosperity and the future of our country. And so we must always, Mr. Speaker, seek to improve our circumstances in a constantly evolving international environment, where contemporary challenges are increasingly transboundary in nature, be they the economic demands of globalization, terrorism, the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, pressures on global, natural, and energy resources, the adverse impact of global warming and climate change, human rights abuses, extremes of poverty, or regional threats posed by failed or failing states. These trends are placing considerable pressure on all countries, including the Bahamas, to be more globally active and equipped for this rapidly changing, less predictable world. These are challenges that have to be faced at a time when the resources needed to do our work are shrinking significantly, both at the national and international levels. And so, Mr. Speaker, we must be judicious in the use of our limited resources. It means then that we have to make good and effective use of these limited resources available to us. We have to be strategic in the conduct of our work. Therefore, much focus must be brought to the assignment of resources, both human and financial, to areas that acutely align with our national development plans and that will return value for our money. Simply put, we must achieve tangible results from all of our exertions in the international arena. You know, one example of this, Mr. Speaker, might be my unintended but necessary trip to Washington during the 30th of May through the 1st of June in order to participate in the 29th meeting of consultation of ministers of foreign affairs on the situation in Venezuela. Almost immediately upon assuming office, as a Minister of Foreign Affairs, I engaged deliberations regarding the situation in Venezuela, which is currently embroiled in unrest. After soundings in various quarters, I proceeded to advise the Prime Minister and subsequently the Cabinet that it was necessary to attend a special ministerial consultation at the Organization of American States, the OAS. There, the Bahamas joined with the Caribbean community, CARICOM, in adopting a unified position on Venezuela, which I was charged with presenting to the OAS at that special meeting on behalf of CARICOM. The consensus statement as agreed by heads of government stressed CARICOM's commitment to the principles of non-intervention, non-interference, and for the need for Venezuela's government and opposition to engage in constructive dialogue toward a peaceful outcome to that country's problems. Mr. Speaker, even though Venezuela is almost 1,500 miles away from the Bahamas, as part of our territory, we were able to exhibit leadership and resolve toward ameliorating the plight of that country and its people by standing united as a region in our call for non-interference in the affairs of Venezuela and a peaceful end to the problems being encountered. In the outcome, my inaugural trip to Washington as the Minister of Foreign Affairs for this country demonstrated that we have a very important role to play in regional and international affairs, which requires our unwavering participation. Mr. Speaker, this does not negate the reality, however, that we are a small country with a relatively small foreign service, which must strive to be judicious in the deployment of our human and capital resources. Therefore, I have instructed a shrewd and thorough examination of the ministry's human, fiscal, and other resources to ensure that our priorities align with our national objectives of achieving national security and economic growth that lends to the making of a better life for Bahamians from Grand Key and Abaco to those in Matthewtown and in Agua. Now, Mr. Speaker, lest I am misunderstood by anyone, I fully appreciate the inevitability that the minister and officials of the foreign ministry will have to undertake a considerable amount of travel during any fiscal year. And you know, I say to my PS and Director General that I represent an island in North Abaco, and I am not interested in flying all over the world unless it is absolutely necessary. And so we do not have to attend, Mr. Speaker, every meeting that takes place in every corner of the globe. Instead, we will make better use of modern technology to participate in meetings by video conferencing and so on, to cut down on the cost and the waste that we have seen in years past. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, in determining travel plans during the fiscal year, I have instructed that when we do travel to meetings, there will be several criteria that are put into place. In Yamoussoukro, we don't have to travel in first class
plane going one place.
And so the meetings that we attend, they must accord with our national development and strategic goals.
You can't travel for nothing.
Mr. Speaker, individuals in the delegation must have a critical role to play. And we must ensure that Bahamians are getting value for their tax money. The first thing I learned in law school was truth. Truth, South Beach, is an absolute defense to any suit. An overview of my ministry, Mr. Speaker, reveals that some 326 public and contracted officers and locally engaged staff are assigned between headquarters, the passport office in Nassau, in Grand Bahama, and Abaco. 326. The consular division and the 12 overseas embassies, high commissions, and permanent missions, and consulates general. They break down as follows, Mr. Speaker. 4 embassies, and they can be found in one in the United States, one in Haiti, one in Cuba, and one in China. 2 high commissions, one in Canada, and one in the United Kingdom. 2 permanent missions to the United Nations, one in New York and the other one in Geneva. And 4 consular offices in Miami, New York, Atlanta, and Washington, D.C. Their work is supported by a network of honorary consulates around the world. Perhaps some of the more important work done by the ministry relates to the direct services we offer the Bahamians both at home and overseas. We seek to protect the rights and to render assistance to Bahamian nationals in distress abroad. The members of our diplomatic and consular service make themselves available to Bahamians at any hour of the day or night. They assist as best they can in some of the most difficult of circumstances. Their commitment to service is commendable. Mr. Speaker, I think I should say right here that coming from a military background, I found it strange that in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs we had no duty officer system, where if a Bahamian is in distress anywhere in the world, yes, they can contact the local embassy or consulate, but I thought it prudent to establish a duty officer system in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs proper that will keep track of these events as they occur, as most foreign ministries all over the world, I'm sure, they do. Perhaps some of the more important, my personal observations to this point is that the ministry is replete with a number of dedicated and talented administrative and technical staff assigned at home and abroad. Mr. Speaker, that said, I have instructed the Permanent Secretary, the Director General, and the senior staff of the ministry to look at each of the overseas offices with a view to determining whether their staffing structures accord with the fiscal realities of our country. Further, I have asked for a review to be determined whether staffing in each office hold the necessary skill set and have undergone the prerequisite training to help us obtain our goals and objectives. Those who comprise our overseas officers must clearly understand and fully appreciate the reasons for their postings, while always seeking to live up to the expectations of the ministry and the Bahamian people. The very same outcomes are expected of those assigned in the ministry's headquarters. Simply put, Mr. Speaker, there are no more free lunches in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The service will only grow through the continuous training and retooling of staff, skills at all levels, which I will address a little later on in these remarks. The rotation of skills and experiences must take place in a modern foreign service. This way, persons who have been abroad for 3 years or more will return to headquarters, and others who have met all of the requirements for service overseas will get an opportunity to be posted out. You know, I found it rather odious that we have a lot of young people sitting in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who invested greatly in their education, burning the midnight oil. And we found it prudent to contract individuals and send them overseas, while our young people, bright individuals, just sit languishing in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Not on my watch, Mr. Speaker. These offices and appointments will no longer be used for the placement of persons who do not even possess the basic educational requirements to be in a foreign service office, at the expense of those who have worked hard to qualify themselves for the service. No more. No more. No more. No more. You know, during my campaign in North Abaco, Mr. Speaker, I ran into a lot of parents, a lot of concerned citizens who said that their children were no longer interested in coming home after school.
Boy, that's true. Rain, rain.
They're no longer interested in coming home.
Rain, rain.
Because it was so difficult for them to be employed for the qualifications that they had gained while at university. You know, and I fully agree with Yamakro, who says, as an Abaconian I know, that we have a lot of disenfranchised people in this country that we speak not of often, but whom we have promised on the campaign trail. This is not just campaign, this is not just political rhetoric, that we will seek to ameliorate their conditions. Because, you know, we raise these children from the cradle and give them a good education, good benefits in healthcare and other forms of socialization. And then they go to foreign countries for education, and these people decide that they wish to utilize our investments. Makes no good sense to me. And if you are familiar with what is going on, as the Minister of Education is, I know these are the children that are excelling in our schools. They are not only finishing top in their islands, they are finishing top in the country, and the Bahamas must benefit from these children, for they are our children. I spent 6 months doing peacekeeping in Haiti, and over there they call them Bahamians, and here we call them something else. We must find the political courage and the will to fix this problem. It has gone on for too long in our country.
Right away. You fix it. Fix it, man.
A minister's mandate. We will fix it. We will fix it. We will fix it or we will regret it. We must fix it. Mr. Speaker, my mandate as the government's principal advisor on foreign policy issues can only be proficiently achieved by the placement of the Bahamas' finest foreign service officers in the positions that they have trained for. As such, I intend to optimize all of the human resources at the ministry to achieve optimal results. By so doing, our diplomatic and consular services will be better equipped to bring acute focus to our country's national security and economic interest. Along with ensuring the advancement of the security and economic interests of the Bahamas, my ministry is also charged with the following broadly stated responsibilities and more. the protection of the rights and rendering of assistance to Bahamian nationals abroad through the services of our resident embassies, high commissions, and consulates general and honorary consular agents abroad. The provision of protocol services to government and resident diplomatic and consular corps, accreditation of foreign government representatives accredited to the Bahamas government representatives accredited to foreign countries, providing advice and assistance as appropriate to civil society, the maintenance and updating of a register of international instruments to which the Bahamas is a state party, monitoring the development of new international instruments that are in the Bahamas' national interest, analyzing such instruments from an international political perspective for consideration by government, the coordination of treaty implementation, the functioning as a channel of communication for the receipt and transmission of extradition requests between foreign governments and the appropriate Bahamian ministry or department of the government. The reinforcement of the ministry's framework for and work in the area of law of the sea, particularly in respect of maritime delimitation. The coordination of technical assistance from regional and international organizations and other states for capacity building in the areas which include education, the professions, special technical areas, and foreign service. Mr. Speaker, in foreign affairs, we also assist in the control of the borders of the Bahamas through the issuance of visas and recommendations on visa policy and entry requirements, the coordination and provision of information and materials as appropriate to other ministries and departments of the government, having direct responsibility as principal representatives for international specialized technical and legal bodies or meetings, and the issuance of national identity documents, including passports, certificates of identity, emergency passports through the passport office in New Providence, in Freeport, in Grand Bahama, and the Family Islands, which includes Abaco, and foreign missions. The government's objectives. Mr. Speaker, Sir Andrews looked perplexed. Oh, okay. I know Sir Andrews knows what I'm talking about. He's quite familiar with this ministry. Mr. Speaker, as we seek to continue to provide these important services, this government has committed to strengthening reforms to bring greater accountability to those tasked. Man, I thought you were my friend, and I thought we could do that, right?
Smile, man.
I mean, we island boys together. To bring greater, oh, I'm not hometown. I just told him this morning I grew up in Andrews and Little.
Okay.
Committed to strengthening reforms to bring greater accountability to those tasked with providing services and ensuring that these services are carried out more efficiently. The provision of services to the public should not be treated as a chore, nor should the public feel frustrated in accessing these services. The Bahamian people make it possible for us to be here, and it is time for the public to reap the benefits of their hard-earned tax dollars. Our manifesto speaks to renewing the ministry's focus on the demarcation of the Bahamas' maritime borders and discussions with our neighbors on new programs to help stem the flow or irregular migration and to reduce levels of illegal fishing in Bahamian waters. Mr. Speaker, since taking office, I have had the opportunity to raise this at various levels in one neighboring country and have ascertained that the next step is for the Bahamas to formally propose the resumption of negotiations with that country so that we can delimit our boundaries. we have begun the process of reconstituting the government's Maritime Boundary Delimitation Committee. Mr. Speaker, after 40-odd years of serving as part of the general public service in a specialist capacity, a modernization process for the Bahamas Foreign Service led to the development of the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Ministry as per the Foreign Affairs Act of 2014. The technical work of the ministry falls under that department. The department consists of the Office of the Director General, the Foreign Service Training Division, the Legal Division, the Americas Division, the Consular Division, the International Relations Division, the Economic Trade and Sustainable Development Division, the Honorary Councils and Technical Assistance Division, the Protocol Division, and the Public Affairs Division. I am advised that a three-pronged approach was adopted in the modernization of the Foreign Service. Phases 1 and 2 of this approach, codifying Foreign Service orders and revising the allowances package for Foreign Service officers, respectively, have been completed through the promulgation of the mentioned Act and the Public Service Commission, the Foreign Service Orders, Regulations 2014, which provides for, among other things, the required qualifications of Foreign Service officers and employees to serve overseas. The third and final phase, which witnessed the implementation of a distinct Foreign Service career path and salary scale to be retroactively dated to the 1st of July 2016. Now, Mr. Speaker, to cement the professionalization of the Foreign Service, care must be taken to include more career officers, the head of mission level, than has recently been the case. This would reflect the intent of the Foreign Service regulations and the government of the Bahamas in this regard. That said, it is recognized that the regulations are not perfect, and we will work with the Public Service Commission and the Ministry of the Public Service to make the necessary changes. The way forward. Mr. Speaker, consistent with the long overdue upgrade of terms and conditions for Foreign Service officers, the Ministry upgraded its training through the creation of the Foreign Service Training Division, as you heard me indicated. Resultantly, work is underway toward the development of a Foreign Service Institute for new and existing officers. The Institute will provide new officers with the skills and information to enable them to function effectively as foreign officers before being posted overseas in foreign missions. It is also intended that existing officers, or those who are already on our strength, will have the opportunity for recurrent training and refresher courses to ensure that they are fully versed in new initiatives which may be useful in the conduct of their duties. Using existing resources, preliminary training needs assessment has been completed. Global best practices research, curriculum recommendations compiled and discussions conducted with the University of the Bahamas on a possible long-term developments that are to be undertaken. Consultations with international bilateral and multilateral partners are ongoing to identify innovative mechanisms for training at various levels of the ministry and in the Foreign Service. In May 2017, the first cohort of entry-level Foreign Service officers completed a 5-week induction training program, which I'm advised has proven very effective and helpful for the induction of new officers coming in to the ministry in their preparation to be placed overseas in the Foreign Service. Mr. Speaker, there are many benefits to our existing diplomatic relations. The Bahamas has formally established diplomatic relations with 114 countries around the world and coordinates the advice of the Cabinet as new requests to establish diplomatic relations with additional countries are received for decisions. That coordination is conducted through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Scores of Bahamian students and professionals have benefited from scholarships offered by our bilateral and multilateral partners. I am advised that collaboration with Kazakhstan led to the award of a grant for training to the Bahamas that will shortly be put to good use. Mr. Speaker, we also have many financial commitments as participants in the global community. Our regional and hemispheric relations are in good shape, as demonstrated by my recent meetings convened to facilitate dialogue to bring relief to the unfolding crisis in Venezuela. And so, you know, Mr. Speaker, foreign relations requires monies too. You want to stop now? You want me to stop now? Yeah. Yes, that's fine. That's fine. You sign. The maintenance of good regional and hemispheric relations, however, comes with quite a price tag. The Bahamas has membership in a wide range of international organizations, reflecting the domestic and foreign policy priorities of the government. These organizations require annual payments in the form of contributions to fund their operations. Regardless of whether the organization in question was joined for foreign or domestic policy reasons, all contributions are paid from the budget allocation of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. For the fiscal period 2017-2018, some $221,412 is earmarked for contributions to international organizations. That's quite a pretty penny, Mr. Speaker. Let me say that one again. Some $8,221,412 is earmarked for contributions to international organizations. Like the UN, like CARICOM, like the OAS, and others. This represents more than 20% of the ministry's overall budget allocation of $36,738,190. With our partner ministries, we will carefully rationalize the benefits derived from our participation in these international organizations relative to the level of our contributions. For operations, therefore, of headquarters, the consular services and passport offices in Nassau, Grand Bahama, and Abaco, and 12 overseas offices, the ministry has allocated $28,516,778. Of this amount, $18,407,533, or 50% of our overall budget allocation, is earmarked for personal emoluments and allowances. These items reflect increases to enable the ministry to meet the commitments for promotions, for public offices, and to allow for adjustments required by the new Foreign Service career path, which, as I mentioned earlier, was formally approved. Salaries for local staff who work at our overseas missions also need to be adjusted to allow for increases in minimum wages, and post cities, and the hiring of additional officers to meet the needs of the post. I am advised that some local staff have not had a salary increase in 10 years. In 10 years. Other fixed and contractual costs to operate the ministry amount to $9,661,745, or approximately 25% of our overall budget. Mr. Speaker, this one I found somewhat perplexing. What effectively happens then is that the ministry's allocation to carry out the functional aspects of my portfolio is $444,500, or 1.5% of the total budget allocation for 2017-2018. And so I suppose I will be knocking on the Minister of Foreign Affairs' door.
Minister of Finance.
And not so long, the Minister of Finance's door, East Grand Bahama.
You can knock all the way. You can knock.
And not so long a time. As a ministry that routinely provides services to other ministries, government departments, example protocol and visa, credentials and treaty arrangements, there is a need to re-evaluate the resources assigned to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Human capital, transportation, infrastructure, office supplies, and so on, to ensure the effective functioning and delivery of services. Nonetheless, you want me to stop now? Nonetheless, given the budget realities we face, the Bahamian people can be assured that my ministry will do its part to reduce government expenditure whilst continuing to provide a high level of service. It's a good time, right?
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do move that the House do suspend until 3 p.m. today, Wednesday, the 14th of June.
Do we have a seconder? Yeah.
Before we break, if I could just, for the record, that I think that are not correct, Mr. Speaker.
Are you rising on a point of order?
No, yes, on a point of order, Mr. Speaker, on a point of order. I didn't want to interrupt the member.
What is the point?
Speaker, the point was that the member made a couple of assertions about airports. He's talking about the state of the economy, and I think that what he was suggesting or saying was that we spend millions and millions, and we didn't do, and the country was downgraded, you were left in debt, and we didn't do anything with airports, we didn't do anything with schools, and I think he mentioned we were downgraded 4 times, and that is the issue, Mr. Speaker. I think the member may not be aware, Mr. Speaker, that in relation to airports, the San Salvador airport was completely redeveloped, Mr. Speaker.
But,
Secondly, Speaker, it's not correct. What he said is not correct, Mr. Speaker. It's not correct. Speaker, we completed the 2 phases of Linden
Honourable member.
We redeveloped the Samuel Key Airport.
Honourable member.
Yes, Mr.
You're rising on a point of order?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
What is the point of order?
The point of order is that the information that the member put out in the public domain in this House is not correct. It is not correct, Mr. Speaker. And I'm correcting it, Mr. Speaker. It's not correct.
I'll tell you what I said. I said that the former government did not build 1 school, did not build 1 clinic, did not build 1 airport. That's what I said, and I rested there. That is what I said.
The San Salvador airport was completely redeveloped, Mr. Speaker. The Samuel Key Airport The Stanley Airport was completely redeveloped.
Honorable members, honorable
Millions
members.
have been spent in airports and in schools in this country
Honorable,
between 2012 and 2007.
honorable member.
And what the member has represented is
Honorable
not
member.
Speaker. Yes, sir. Shh. The
Honorable
speaker is
member.
speaking, man. Come on, man. Calm down, man. Say Let the speaker.
This, honorable member, based on what I heard the member say, you are standing on a point of order to make a correction to something that was not in error. Because your point, your point that you're making about renovations or refurbishment and so on, okay. Honorable member. I understand the need to want to rebut. However, if you stand on a point of order, the member said new. There was no new airport. And what you are suggesting in response is not that a new airport was built. The chair, hold on, honorable member. And this would be applicable to all members. The rules indicate that when you rise on a point of order, you state the rule that you are standing on a point of order. And with respect to the issue that you are raising now, it really amounts to a rebuttal. And the rebuttal that you are presenting to the House is not one that is based on the statement made by the minister or the member. What you are doing is offering a rebuttal to present a different argument, completely different argument, because it is not a rebuttal to the statement that the honorable member made. He made a statement that there was no new airport.
Member is not refuting that millions was spent in redevelopment of schools
That
and
was
airports in this country. I have no further objection, Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this honorable House suspend until 3 p.m. Those who are in favor remain seated. Those who oppose will rise. The business of the House stands suspended until 3 p.m.